The largest smartphone manufacturer on Earth just sold more phones than at any point in its history. Record-breaking pre-orders. The best-selling flagship the company has ever launched. Lines at carrier stores. Praise from reviewers. And despite all of that, the division that makes those phones is heading toward its first operating loss in the company's entire history. That company and what is happening to Samsung's mobile division right now is the single most important story in the smartphone industry in 2026. Because if this can happen to Samsung, it can happen to anyone. And for 7 brands, it already is. This is not a list of bad phones. Several brands on this list make excellent hardware. But excellent hardware does not prevent a company from dying when the math stops working. And in 2026, the math has stopped working for more brands than at any point since the smartphone revolution began. Number 1. Samsung's mobile division. I need to be precise about this. Samsung Electronics is not dying. Samsung's semiconductor division is projected to earn up to $69 billion in operating profit in 2026. The company is one of the most profitable corporations on Earth. What is dying is the Samsung you know, the Samsung that makes the phone in your pocket. Samsung's mobile experience division, called Samsung MX, has been placed under emergency management. T.M. Rowe, the head of the division, issued the warning directly to leadership. The operating profit margin fell from 11% in the first quarter of 2025 to approximately 3% in the first quarter of 2026. Some internal sources say that maintaining even a 1% margin will be extremely difficult going forward. Forecasts suggest operating profit could drop from 12.9 trillion won, approximately $8.6 billion, in 2025 to around 5 trillion won, approximately $3.3 billion, in 2026. That is a 60% decline in 1 year. And the most pessimistic projections do not rule out an annual operating deficit. Read that again. Samsung sold more Galaxy S26 phones than any flagship in company history, and the division still might lose money. The cause is not declining sales. The cause is that Samsung's own semiconductor division, the same company, different business unit, has raised the price of memory chips by approximately 850% over the past year. AI companies like Nvidia are paying extraordinary premiums for high bandwidth memory. Samsung's chip division has more profitable customers than Samsung's phone division. So Samsung's phone division pays the inflated market rate for components made by Samsung's chip division. Samsung is eating itself. The emergency response has been immediate and dramatic. A mandatory 30% reduction in operating expenses across all business lines. Staff reassignment, early retirement incentives for senior employees. Executives below vice president level can no longer fly business class on flights under 2 hours. Samsung's Galaxy A series mid-range phones saw price increases across every market. The Galaxy S26 base model went from $799 to $859. The S26 Plus went from $999 to $1,059. Samsung is sourcing cheaper old panels from Chinese manufacturers SOT and Bo for mid-range models, and potentially for the Galaxy S27 flagship next year. Samsung is not going to disappear. The company has too many revenue streams, too much infrastructure, and too much market share for that. But Samsung's mobile division as a profit center, the engine that funded Galaxy innovation for a decade, is being hollowed out by the same AI boom that is making Samsung's chip division the most profitable unit in the company. The brand that defined Android smartphones is in survival mode. That is not speculation. That is the company's own internal classification. Number 2. ASUS confirmed its exit from the smartphone market in January 2026. Chairman Johnny Xie made the announcement public. The ROG Phone 9 Fe and the Zenfone 12 Ultra were the final products. No future phones will be developed. The exit was not sudden. It was a slow compression that the numbers made inevitable, ASUS sold smartphones primarily to enthusiasts. The ROG phone targeted mobile gamers. The Zenfone targeted buyers who wanted a compact, stock Android experience. Both audiences were too small to sustain competitive R&D spending against Samsung, Apple, and the Chinese brands that were delivering better value at lower prices. ASUS pivoted to AI servers and robotics, markets where the margins are higher and the volume requirements are lower. The company saw more profit potential in selling fewer, more expensive products to enterprise customers than in selling more, cheaper products to consumers who compare every phone against 12 competitors. ASUS phones still exist on retail shelves. Every one of them is a stranded device. 2 to 3 years of committed software updates on hardware that will never be followed by a successor. Buying an ASUS phone in 2026 is buying a product whose manufacturer has publicly stated it will not make another one. Number 3. OnePlus in Western markets. OnePlus launched in 2014 with a waitlist and a manifesto. The company would make flagship phones at honest prices. No marketing budgets inflating the cost. No carrier deals adding middlemen. Just hardware, priced at what it costs, sold directly to buyers who knew what they were getting. 12 years later, Oppo is reportedly dismantling the brand. Reports indicate that Oppo has begun canceling the OnePlus 2026 product lineup and has plans to exit North American and European markets. R&D teams in India have been reduced to a fraction of their former. Approximately 10 employees remain in North America with similar staffing in Europe. Sales declined over 20% between 2023 and 2024, while parent company Oppo grew during the same period. OnePlus stopped growing in the markets it was built for, while Oppo decided those markets were not worth the cost of maintaining a separate brand. The OnePlus 15 and 15R are among the best phones available in 2026. The 15R has a 7400 mAh battery, the largest in any flagship. Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, IP68 plus IP69 protection. The hardware is not the problem. The corporate structure behind the hardware is the problem. A phone that might not have a warranty office in your country by 2027 is a phone that comes with an asterisk, regardless of how good its spec sheet looks. OnePlus is not dying because the phones got worse. OnePlus is dying because Oppo decided the Western market was not profitable enough to justify a dedicated sub-brand when Oppo's own phones serve the same audience for less operational cost. Number 4. Sony Xperia. Sony's smartphone business has been retreating for a decade. The company that gave the world the Walkman, the Trinitron, and the PlayStation cannot make a phone that the mass market wants to buy. The Xperia 1 series targets professional photographers and audiophiles. A 4K display. A 3.5mm headphone jack. Manual camera controls that replicate Sony's alpha mirrorless cameras. Pro video modes with Cinema Pro. These are genuinely excellent features for the small number of people who use them. That number is not large enough to sustain a competitive smartphone division. Sony's computational photography trails Google, Apple, and Samsung in the auto mode that 99% of smartphone users rely on. Battery life suffers under the 4K display. Software support is shorter than Samsung and Google offer. Market availability outside Japan is inconsistent. After-sales support is, and the price, often exceeding $999 for the flagship, competes with phones that deliver a better experience for the general buyer. Sony is not going to announce an exit the way ASUS did. Sony will do what Sony does. Quietly reduce the lineup. Ship fewer models. Limit availability to fewer markets. Extend the gap between generations until the Xperia name appears so rarely that its absence becomes the default. The brand will not die. It will fade until nobody notices it is gone. Number 5. HTC made the first Android phone. The T-Mobile G1, also known as the HTC Dream, launched in October 2008 and started the Android revolution. Every Android phone you have ever used exists because HTC took the risk of building hardware for a mobile operating system that had 0 users. That company is effectively dead in mobile. HTC's last competitive smartphone was the HTC U12 Plus in 2018. The company shifted focus to virtual reality with the Vive headset line, enterprise metaverse solutions, and blockchain phones that generated more attention for their concept than their sales. HTC still technically exists as a company. The Vive division has a future in the VR and mixed reality market, but the smartphone division that created Android as a consumer platform has not released a globally competitive phone in nearly 8 years. HTC is on this list not because it is dying in 2026. HTC died years ago. It is here as the historical precedent that proves this pattern is real. A company that creates an entire market category can still lose everything within a decade. If it happened to HTC, it can happen to anyone, including the brand at number 1 on this list. Number 6. TCL and Alcatel. TCL operates on margins so thin that the 2026 component cost crisis may be unsurvivable. The company sells phones primarily through carrier partnerships, relying on subsidized deals that mask the true cost from the buyer. That business model works when component costs are stable. When memory prices increase by 850%, the model collapses because the carrier subsidy does not adjust to match manufacturing cost increases. TCL's hardware quality has consistently trailed what Motorola, Samsung, and Xiaomi deliver at identical price points. The company has never established a brand identity strong enough to command premium. It competes exclusively on being cheaper, which means it has no margin buffer when costs rise. The Alcatel brand, also owned by TCL, represents an even more challenged position. Alcatel phones are sold at the absolute floor of the market, where margins are measured in single-digit dollars per unit. At those margins, the 2026 cost environment is existentially threatening. TCL is not exiting smartphones voluntarily. TCL is being pushed toward the exit by the same forces that took ASUS and are taking OnePlus. Rising costs, thin margins, and competitors who can absorb cost increases that TCL cannot. Number 7. Smaller Chinese brands that cannot compete on scale. Stays Nubia sub-brand. Meizu, Coolpad, Micromax, these brands occupy a space that is being compressed from both sides simultaneously. From above, Xiaomi, Oppo, and Honor have the manufacturing scale and purchasing power to absorb component cost increases. From below, there is no below. You cannot sell a phone for less than the components cost. These brands thrived in the 2018 to 2022 era when component costs were stable or declining. A small brand could buy the same processors, sensors, and memory chips as the large brands and assemble a competitive phone at a competitive price. The 850% memory price increase destroyed that. Small volume purchasers pay the highest per unit component prices. When those prices explode, the brands with the least purchasing leverage are the first to break. Not all of these brands will die. Some will retreat to regional markets where their distribution networks give them an advantage. Some will survive by becoming white-label manufacturers for carrier-branded phones. But as independent, globally competitive smartphone brands, their window is closing. The market is consolidating around the brands that have the scale to survive a supply chain crisis. Now, 3 brands that are taking over. Brand 1. Xiaomi. Xiaomi is the primary beneficiary of every market shift in 2026. While competitors shrink, Xiaomi's ecosystem strategy, phones plus IoT plus smart home plus electric vehicles, gives the company revenue diversification that pure phone brands cannot match. When phone margins compress, Xiaomi's smart home revenue provides a buffer. When component costs rise, Xiaomi's purchasing volume across multiple product categories gives it negotiating leverage that single product brands lack. The Xiaomi 17 Ultra competes at the top of the market against Samsung and Apple on camera quality. Poco and Redmi dominate the mid-range and budget segments with phones that deliver flagship specifications at half the price. The company manufactures in its own facilities with its own quality control. Vertical integration allows cost absorption that brands relying on contract manufacturing cannot achieve. Xiaomi shipped more smartphones globally than at any previous point in 2025. While Samsung's mobile division entered emergency management, Xiaomi grew. That divergence in trajectory is the market telling you where the industry is heading. Brand 2. Honor. Honor is filling the exact market position that OnePlus is vacating. A post-Huawei independent brand with its own R&D, its own supply chain, full Google services access, and a 7-year software update commitment that matches Samsung and Google. The Honor Magic V6 Foldable launched at MWC 2026 with a 7,150 mAh battery, Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, a 64-megapixel periscope telephoto, and IP68 plus IP69 protection at a starting price of approximately $1,302 in China. The Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 with comparable specifications starts at approximately $1,799 in the US. Honor is offering Samsung-level foldable hardware at a price Samsung cannot match without further compressing the margins that are already approaching zero. Honor's European market share is growing. The brand is gaining carrier partnerships. The Magic Series phones are appearing in retail stores that previously carried only Samsung, Apple, and Google. Honor is not replacing OnePlus as a niche challenger brand. Honor is positioning itself as a mainstream alternative to Samsung at a lower price, with a matching software support commitment. That is a significantly larger addressable market. Brand 3. Motorola. Lenovo's manufacturing infrastructure gives Motorola something that no other mid-range brand possesses: scale without the brand premium that scale usually demands. Lenovo makes laptops, tablets, servers, and phones. The manufacturing expertise and supply chain relationships built across those categories flow into the Motorola phone division, enabling component pricing that standalone phone brands cannot access. The result is the most honest pricing in the industry. The Edge 60 Fusion at $350 delivers a display, battery, and durability package that rivals $700 phones. The Moto G Power 2026 at $299 is a 120Hz old phone with a capable processor and near-stock Android. The Razr Ultra has taken the flip phone crown from Samsung. Across every price segment, Motorola delivers more hardware per dollar than any competitor except Poco. Motorola's growth strategy is the opposite of Samsung's. Samsung is raising prices to protect margins. Motorola is holding prices to gain market share. In a market where consumers are being asked to pay more for less from Samsung and Apple, Motorola's stable pricing becomes a competitive advantage by default. The brand does not need to do anything exceptional. It just needs to keep doing what it has been doing while the premium brands price themselves into vulnerability. Every mentioned in this video is linked in the description below. I research every product I feature and recommend only what I genuinely trust. Here is the shape of the market in 2026. The smartphone industry is not growing. Global shipments are flat. The brands that survive from here will not survive by selling more phones. They will survive by selling phones at a sustainable margin while absorbing component cost increases that are not going away. Samsung has the infrastructure and the brand recognition to survive, but the mobile division will look fundamentally different in 2 years. Smaller margins, cheaper components, more aggressive cost cutting. The Samsung that built the Galaxy S line into a cultural icon is being replaced by a Samsung that flies economy class and buys display panels from Chinese manufacturers to save $5 per unit. The brands taking over have one thing in common: they were already built for thin margins. Xiaomi, Honor, and Motorola did not need to restructure when memory prices increased by 850%. They were already operating at cost structures designed for exactly this environment. The 2026 crisis did not create their advantage. It revealed it. The smartphone market is not dying. The smartphone market is being repriced, and the brands that set their prices closest to reality are the ones that will still be here when the repricing is finished. Subscribe if this changed your understanding of where the phone industry is heading. The next video covers 5 cheap flagship phones everyone ignores. And one of them has a battery so large that it makes every phone on this list, dying and thriving, look like it was designed for 2019.